Dr. Camden this afternoon. My name is David. Our steerer this afternoon is Andy. Just to let you know, we have life rings on the roof of the boat and we have fire extinguishers both at the front and the back of the boat. However, I don't wish to use them today, so can I ask that you please keep your arms and your heads within the confines of the boat. No jumping in the canal, no lighting fires, and we'll all get there safely. On our way up to Camden this afternoon, I shall tell you some of the history of the canal and point out some things which you may find of interest. So we are currently on the Grand Union Canal. This canal opened in 1801 to bring goods from the industrial north of the country down to the south. The island which you see to the right of us here is called Browning Island. This is named after the English poet Robert Browning, who lived in this area and is said to have sat on the island and composed poetry. The Grand Union Canal goes around to the right of the island, up to the Paddington Basin, where it comes to a halt. On the left-hand side of the canal there is a walkway. This is called the towpath. When the canals first opened, the boats using the canals had no engines. So in order to navigate the canals, a horse would have been tethered to the front of the boat. The horse would walk along the towpath, towing the boat behind it. Hence the name the towpath. As we pass underneath this bridge, we are now entering the Regent's Canal. This canal opened in 1810 to bring goods further into London and to and from the docks area. The small brick building you see to the left of us here was once a toll house, and here the canal users would have to stop and pay their tolls. This is now a private residence. You may have noticed Andy has slowed the boat down somewhat. This is so that we do not cause too much disturbance to the boats moored on either side of us along here. All the boats moored on this stretch of the canal are on permanent moorings, and people live in these boats all of the year round. These boats are all connected to the electricity supply system, and on board the boats they have running water and flushing toilets. The people living on the boats cook using bottled gas, and in the winter they heat their boats with either coal or wood-fired burners. Their wastewater and sewage is pumped out of pump stations which are situated along the canals, or they have pump-out boats which come in, pump out their waste for them and take it to the sewage works. None of their waste goes into the canal. When the canals were first constructed, they had no mechanised machinery. Therefore, all the canals were dug out by hand. Many of the men who worked on the construction of the canals were migrants from Ireland. Many of these had a naval background, and they became known as navvies. We used the word navvy in England in a derogatory manner up until the mid-60s, and generally this referred to men who worked on the construction of the motorways. The majority of the boats which you see moored along here are built from wood and steel, much the same as Jason's is built from wood and steel. Jason's was formerly a cargo boat and is one of the oldest boats still operating on the canals today. At the area in which you are sitting is where the cargo will have been stowed. So this afternoon, in effect, you are my cargo. Today, more and more people are looking to live on boats on canals, and it's generally cheaper to purchase a boat than it is to purchase a property, especially in our larger cities like London, Manchester and Birmingham, all of which have interconnected canal systems Factors people would consider when purchasing a boat would be the age of the boat, the size of the boat, and the condition of the boat. Similar to the factors you may take into account when looking for a new partner. And these things matter. Especially condition. Coming up directly ahead of us is the Maida Hill Tunnel. This was built between 1812 and 1814. However, inside the tunnel there are no tow paths. So back when horses were towing the boats along the canals, the horse would have been untethered at the bottom of the hill on the left. The horse would have been walked over the tunnel to wait for the boat at the other end. In order to get through the tunnel, the crew would lay a plank of wood across the front of the boat. A member of the crew would lie at either end of the plank on their backs with their legs outstretched and their feet on the wall of the tunnel, and they would walk the boat through the tunnel. This was known as legging a boat. This particular tunnel is only 250 metres in length. However, there are some tunnels on the canal which are up to 3 miles in length. So if you had to leg a boat through a 3-mile tunnel, you need pretty strong legs to get you from one end of it to the other, and I suspect you might need to lie down afterwards. So I'm going to shut up while we go through the tunnel, and I'll speak to you when we get to the other end. on the left is where a horse would be waiting for us after the crew had led the boat through the tunnel. The horse would once again be tethered to the front of the boat and will continue towing the boat along the canal. A single horse will be able to tow a boat carrying up to 30 tonnes in weight of cargo. As you go under this bridge up ahead of us, if you look to the left of the bridge, underneath the white painted marking, down towards the bottom, you'll see a number of grooves etched into the metalwork. These grooves have been caused over many years by ropes rubbing against the metalwork as horses towed boats along the canal, leaving these marks. This section of the canal here is known as the Lisson Wye. We're in the Lisson Road area of London, and this is the widest section of the canal between Little Venice and Camden, and is the only section of canal wide enough to allow a boat of this length to be able to safely turn. The boats which you see moored on the left of us along here, these again are all on permanent moorings, and again people live in these boats all of the year round. As we go up past these boats, you'll notice there's a gap left between two of the larger boats. This gap is left empty permanently, and it's a space for boats to be able to turn. On the left of the canal you can see a power station. This was once a coal-fired power station, but as we now no longer burn coal in the city because of the pollution, this has now been converted into an electricity substation. Prior to this section of the canal being built, this is where Lord's Cricket Ground used to be. When they began building the canal, Lord's Cricket Ground moved to its current location, which is just beyond the power station in St John's Wood. If you look at the pink rule on the left of the canal, you'll see a number of archways. Two of these were once tunnels going underneath the power station, and boats carrying cargoes of coal would have driven into these tunnels and offloaded their cargo for burning in the power station. Two other of these archways were formerly stables, housing a number of horses at a time, and here the canal users would have been able to rest their horses or exchange them for fresh horses so they could continue their journeys. As well as working on their boats, people also lived on their boats, along with any family members. They would have all stayed in a small back cabin, similar in size to the one on this boat, which is no bigger than a large cupboard. Children from as young as 6 years old were often working on the canal boats alongside their parents. The children would have had no formal schooling, as they would have been continuously travelling up and down the canals. Whilst it may seem harsh for children to be working on canal boats, you have to remember that in Victorian England, Children were often sent up chimneys to sweep the chimneys, and I suspect more children died sweeping chimneys than ever died on working on a canal boat. We are now travelling through the north side of Regent's Park. Regent's Park was designed by the English architect John Nash, and it had previously been a private hunting ground for King Henry VIII. On the left-hand side of the canal is the second largest private garden in London, second only in size to the garden at Buckingham Palace. On the right-hand side of the canal there are a number of very large properties. These properties have been designed in the manner of John Nash. As they're mostly less than 50 years old, they were not designed by him, just in the manner of John Nash. These properties are only available on a leasehold basis.
Just think that we're gonna go near the White House.
For the sum of £25
Not the White House.
million.
We're gonna go to the zoo. Again?
As these properties are all on Crown Estate land, part of the revenue from the properties will go to the Crown Estate, which helps to pay for the upkeep
White
of
House
the
though. I found the White
British
House.
Royal Palaces and the British Royal
The White
Family.
House.
Just on the other side of where these properties sit, on the edge of Regent's Park, is the home to the American Ambassador to the United Kingdom. That property is also on Crown Estate land. In fact, the whole of Regent's Park belongs to the Crown Estate and is one of London's royal parks. This bridge coming up ahead of us is the Tyburn Bridge, and within the Tyburn Bridge flows the Tyburn River. The Tyburn is one of a number of hidden rivers in London. These are rivers which still flow through London, but which now flow mostly underground and are regarded as hidden. The Tyburn, however, continues to flow through this bridge. It flows underneath Buckingham Palace before going down to empty into the River Thames.
Why are you not on the window? Put it on the window right now.
This bridge coming up ahead is called Macclesfield Bridge. This is also known locally as Blower Bridge. The reason it's called that is because back in the early 1900s, a boat which was carrying a cargo of gunpowder accidentally exploded underneath the bridge, both killing the crew and destroying the bridge. The columns which you see today on either side of the bridge are from the original and were used again in its reconstruction, which will indicate that even back then people were aware of the benefits of recycling.
My jacket.
Whilst we no longer have horses walking along the towpath, towing boats behind them, the towpath is very popular with walkers, joggers and cyclists, and is a very pleasant way of getting from one side of London to the other. In fact, sailing down here this afternoon, amongst all this greenery and the wildlife on the canal, it's difficult to imagine that we are only 2 miles away from central London, and all the traffic and the noise of central London. We are now passing through London Zoo. London Zoo is one of the oldest zoos in the world and opened in the 1800s. On the right-hand side of the canal are the enclosures for the warthogs and the African hunting dogs. Coming up on the left-hand side of the canal is the Snowdon Aviary. This was designed in the 1960s by the late Lord Snowdon. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, the aviary began to fall into disrepair and all the birds had to be removed. They were going to pull the aviary down, but as it's a Grade 2 listed building, they decided to repurpose the aviary and it's now a primate enclosure. There are some monkeys out, you can see them in the back there, the long-haired black and white monkeys. And up on the pole, so you can see them there. London Zoo is operated by the Zoological Society of London, who are committed to the conservation of endangered species. Just 2 years ago, at their Woodsnake Park facility, they introduced to the world a newly born white rhino. And white rhino are critically endangered in the wild as they are hunted to their home. This will indicate that their conservation work does have positive outcomes.
Ahoy there, mateys. Ahoy there, mateys. Ahoy there, mateys. Ahoy there, mateys. I'm late. I don't live in a boat. No, I literally can. I like making online business. Or work online. What's protect? What's demure? What's very demure?
Looking directly ahead of us is the Feng Shui Chinese restaurant. And to the right of the restaurant, where these narrowboats are moored, the canal used to go down past these narrowboats further in towards central London. This section of the canal was filled in after the Second World War, when the canals were being used less and less for commercial purposes. The canals began to be revitalised again in the 1960s, when more and more people began to use the canals, both for living upon and for leisure purposes. Today the canals are looked after by the Canal and River Trust, and they, along with a host of volunteers, work to maintain the integrity of the canal system and to keep the canals clean. Keeping the canals clean is a never-ending job, as some people still think it's reasonable to throw their rubbish into the canal. This is not only a danger to the wildlife that live on and in the canal, it's also hazardous to boat users of the canal. We are now in the Primrose Hill area of London. Whilst Primrose Hill is a very expensive area in which to live, Primrose Hill itself is the highest natural point in London, and if you walk to the top of Primrose Hill, you get a fantastic panoramic view over the city. The boats which you see moored along here on the left of the canal, these are on visitor moorings, and these boats are only permitted to stay here for limited periods of time before they have to move on to other areas of the canal. The boats which are moored on the right of the canal, these are on private moorings, and these moorings belong to the people that own the properties. Within the building to the right of us is the Pirates' Castle. This is an organisation which works primarily with children and younger people, teaching them boating skills on the canals, using kayaks, canoes and on waterboards. When we came up here earlier today, this area here was filled with dozens of children out on the canal. This organisation is run primarily by volunteers and depends so much of its funding on voluntary donations.
Hey, send it, please. Please send it.
We have now arrived in Camden Town. Camden Town was once a very industrial part of North London. The white building you see on the right of us here was once the Gilby Gin Distillery. This has now been converted into waterfront apartments. Similarly, the building on the left was once an industrial unit. This too has been converted into waterfront apartments, which probably cost an arm or a leg to purchase. Camden Town today is now more famous for its market, its many music venues, pubs and restaurants. Camden Town is where the band Madness first found fame, and it's also the former home to the late singer Amy Winehouse. Looking directly ahead of us, and as we begin to turn left, you can see Camden Lock. If you were to go down through Camden Lock today, you would go down to the Limehouse Basin, and through a series of further locks, you will eventually come down to the River Thames. But we're going to be turning left here as we're coming towards our mooring. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you all very much for travelling with Jason this afternoon. I do hope that you've enjoyed your journey, and hopefully we will see some of you again. Can I ask that when we get to our mooring, will all please remain seated until I have secured the boat at the mooring. I will then let you know when it's safe for you to disembark. If you'd like to show your appreciation to the crew this afternoon, that would be very kind. And if you wish to do so, there is a tin for that purpose as you leave the boat. Can I please remind everyone to take all of their personal belongings with them, including any children and any husbands. In the meantime, thank you all once again, and wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you.
It's off.